Okay, so now I have the recording going, and we can start with a salutation to the Buddha. Just one time should be enough. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to him, the worthy one. Namo tassa homage to him, the blessed one, the worthy one, the perfectly enlightened one. Okay, so now we've been going through the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Fives, and we come to a section in the Book of Fives, a group of suttas, which deal with a number of basic virtues which are often, I have to say, overlooked or even neglected by Western Buddhists. And these involve certain qualities that we could sort of summarize into or group together under four headings: interwoven, interconnected qualities: faith, confidence, ethical or moral virtue, and generosity. And so these suttas, the compilers of the Anguttara Nikaya seem to have grouped these suttas together because they all deal with one or another, or sometimes several of these virtuous qualities. And so we went through the first three suttas in this chapter, and now we'll continue with sutta number 34. And this is a sutta spoken in a conversation with a man named Siha the General. And when you get to the book, I think it's a book of eights, you find a sutta which gives an account of how Siha the General was originally a devotee of the Jains, a devotee of the Jain teacher called in the Buddhist text Niganta Nataputta, the one that the Jains themselves call Mahavira. And then he came to the Buddha and challenged the Buddha on a number of points, and the Buddha responded to him, satisfying him on each of those points until it reached a point where Siha discarded his confidence in the Jains and embraced the Buddha as his teacher. And what I find somewhat interesting, though the text doesn't elaborate on this in any way, is that Siha is described as a general. The Pali word would be Sena Pati. I think it's Sena Pati. Yeah, so Sena is an army, and Pati is the ruler or lord. So the lord of the army would be, in our modern military terms, would be a general. And I find that particularly interesting because the Jains themselves were the staunchest advocates of nonviolence. For Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, ahimsa parama dhamma, that non-harming is the supreme dharma. And so the Jain ascetics go to such an extent in carrying through the principle of non-harming or non-violence that many of them don't wear any clothes because they don't want to risk endangering the lives of any kind of creatures that might get crumpled up in their clothes. And also it's a symbol of ultimate renunciation that one gives up even covering the body, which expresses some kind of sense of shame over the private parts. So when one completely overcomes that, one discards all clothing. And even the other Jain group, the called the Setambara, those who wear white clothes, will go about with a mask over the face, not to keep the COVID away, not a COVID-style mask, but they wear a mask over the face so that they will not breathe in unintentionally any insect. Because for them, even unintentional acts of harming others, other living beings, creates negative karma, dark karma. Whereas for the Buddha, the decisive factor in action, in generating karma, is the intention, the purpose behind the action. And then even the Buddha, of course, is the great, though he doesn't make non-harming the supreme dharma the way the Jains do, but he is also a very staunch advocate of non-harming, of non-injury, of non-violence. And yet Siya, who's described as a general, is a follower of the Buddha, a devotee of the Buddha. Perhaps by the time he became a follower of the Jains and then the Buddha, he had retired from military service. We don't have any biographical information about him. Anyway, in this case, in this present discourse, he comes to the Buddha and he asks the Buddha whether it's possible to point out a directly visible fruit of giving. So here the theme of this sutta is the practice of giving or generosity. And what Siya is asking about is a directly visible benefit of giving, a benefit that one could see for oneself in this present life. Okay, now let's look through the benefits that the Buddha mentions. So he says, a donor, a lord of giving, munificent giver, is dear and agreeable to many people. So when you're generous, giving to others, whether giving to the poor, giving to renunciants, even those who are not the direct recipients of your generosity, still recognize that you are a good person, a generous person, and then they develop a kind of natural affection for you. Perhaps even if they don't know, this is a little hypothetical, but my suspicion is that if you are giving secretly, sort of not giving openly, not advertising the fact that you're giving, but you're giving in sort of discreet ways, under the table, so to speak, still your character will give out the kind of vibrations, kind of subtle message that you are a generous, kind, and compassionate person. And when you encounter other people, maybe people that you've never met before, people will pick up on those vibrations, and then you become dear and agreeable to them. And so those people will regard you as being a dear and agreeable person. And then the second benefit, and seems a bit similar to the first. Okay, so when you're a donor, a generous person, then now I get the sense of this. Good persons resort to the donor, to the munificent giver. And I think this statement here has a message which would not be immediately come through in translation. Yeah, because the Pali word rendered, or expression rendered as the good persons, is sappurisa. And I think what's being indicated here, and this will be elaborated in one of the later suttas, it's not just good people in general, But the Buddha is using this as a code word to represent renunciants. Particularly, it would be Buddhist monks and Buddhist nuns who would come to the donor, to the generous person, in order to receive offerings from them. Particularly when they go on alms round with the alms bowl. So when they know that somebody is generous and gives freely and abundantly to the renunciants, the ascetics who go on alms round, then the good persons will go to that generous person. And that will give the generous person, the donor, the opportunity by making those offerings to generate merit or wholesome karma. So that is the second benefit. The third benefit is that the generous person acquires a good reputation. So this, of course, shouldn't be the motivation for practicing giving. It's not that you want to get your name up on a plaque or be spoken about and praised by others, but it's just one of the, let's say, the ancillary, the secondary benefits that accrue from practicing generosity, from practicing giving. So other people will praise you and say you are a good person, you're generous, you're kind, you're compassionate, you're helpful to others. And you might get your name on a plaque. You might get a building or a room or something named after you. But of course, one shouldn't pursue this as your main purpose in practicing giving. And then the fourth benefit might be a little bit difficult for us to understand, but maybe we could look into this from a psychological point of view. Okay, so it says, whatever assembly a donor, a generous person approaches, and then the text mentions the various communities of people in the Buddha's time. The kshatriyas, those would be the members of the administrative class, the noble class, or Brahmins, the priestly caste. And then whereas the general Indian society would have two other castes, the Vaishyas, that would be the mercantile castes, business people, traders, professionals, and the Shudras, those would be the laborers. And then below the laborers, there would be the what they now call the outcasts, or the various groups outside the caste system. The Buddha just groups them all together under the heading of householders. He separates out kshatriyas, because those are the kings and princes, the aristocrats. And the Brahmins need special mention because they were the ones who maintained the religious system of the Vedas, these ceremonies, rituals that maintain the social order. But all the other groups are just merged together for the Buddha under the heading of householders. And then the fourth assembly is called the samanas, or Sanskrit shramanas. Those are the renunciants, those who completely leave behind the caste system or the class system in order to adopt a life of renunciation and contemplation. So those are the four assemblies, and whatever assembly this generous person approaches, he approaches it confidently and composed. Particularly, I think if he's going, or what's implied here, if he's going to participate in a discussion in the assembly, when it's his turn to speak up, he can speak confidently with full self-confidence, not speaking shyly, hesitantly, fearfully, but somehow the practice of generosity gives him a sense of maybe inner worth, inner value, inner strength, So when it's his turn to speak, whether in a discussion or to give a talk to the assembly, he can give it with full self-confidence. So that is the fourth directly visible fruit of giving. And remember now, Sia had asked about the directly visible fruits of giving. But now the Buddha is going to add a fifth fruit or benefit of giving. And now he says, with the breakup of the body after death, a donor, a generous giver, is reborn in a good destination, even in a heavenly world. Because the practice of giving, it's one of the bases of merit. It's called one of the bases of merit, and it's one of the paramis, one of the excellent qualities. And so that practice of giving generates a lot of powerful, wholesome karma, which, if it takes on the role of generating rebirth, will bring rebirth into a good destination that could be back into the human realm under fairly good conditions, or into one of the heavenly realms. And if it's only giving without supplemented by the practice of intensive meditation, then it would be one of the heavens of the desire realm, one of the six desire realm heavens. Okay, then the Buddha says that this is a fruit of giving, not a directly visible fruit of giving, but a fruit of giving. Yeah, the Pali uses the expression, let me copy and paste. Yeah, the Pali expression is samparayika. So samparayika is one word in Pali, but to render it in English, you have to use several words. So I use pertaining to future lives. And again, it's a fruit of giving. And is contrasted with the directly visible fruit, which is sandittika, which is based on the word ditti, which means seeing or view. So what you could see directly for yourself is sandittika, and what pertains not to this life, but to future lives is samparayika. Okay, now when the Buddha finishes this explanation, Sia makes a very interesting distinction, which I think, even though the words are put in the mouth of Sia, but this kind of distinction seems so typical of the Buddha himself, who will draw fine distinctions based on kind of reasoned understanding. And so Sia now says, Bhante, I do not go by faith in the Blessed One in regard to the four directly visible fruits of giving, because I know them for myself. And then he explains how I am the generous person, and I'm dear and agreeable to many other people. I have many good people come to me. I have a good reputation. I'm confident in the assemblies. So he says, I don't go by faith in you, in the Blessed One, about those fruits of giving. But when the Blessed One, when you, the Buddha, say to me, with the breakup of the body after death, the generous person is reborn in a good destination, Here I go by faith in the Blessed One, because I don't directly know this for myself. Yeah, so here we have that clear distinction made, what you can know directly for yourself and what you don't know for yourself. And this is where saddha comes in, where faith comes in. The Buddha says that there is this law of karma. There are lives beyond this present life. There are realms of existence beyond this directly visible state of existence we're in now. And these process of rebirth from life to life, going from one existence to another, is governed by the law of karma. So with that, Sia is saying, I don't know that for myself. I don't see that for myself, but I am a follower of the Buddha, and so this I accept on faith. And I find that distinction quite useful in many and several other ways in establishing our relation to the Dharma, to the Buddha's teaching. And so now, today, there's a phenomena which they call secular Buddhism, which, the followers say that, we appreciate so much of the Buddha's teaching, Four Noble Truths, the three marks of existence, practicing sila, and meditation, observing precepts, practicing mindfulness and meditation, getting the benefits from this practice. So we'll accept that, but we're not going to accept anything that we can't see or test or verify for ourselves. So when people want to take that approach, I say, if that's where you want to, if that's the approach to the Dhamma that you want to adopt, and if you want to stop with that, that's fine with me. I'm not going to try to convert anybody or to argue with anybody to coerce them to accept the full range of the Buddha's teaching. But what I would say is that if one actually rejects those teachings that lie beyond one's present capacity for observation, that shows, to my mind, a lack of faith in the Buddha, a deficiency in saddha. So in Buddhism, we say we don't go by blind faith, but what we do is to test those aspects of the Dharma that come within our present range of experience that we can put into practice for ourselves and to some extent verify for ourselves. And then my approach has been, since I find that these teachings work for me in this present life, and since so many other teachings come down again and again, repeated in the suttas, so that we could pretty clearly infer that they come directly from the Buddha himself, then I'm willing to place faith in the Buddha about those teachings that I can see. Some teachings I put in, let's say, in brackets, put to the side, so the text might speak about beings like Gandharvas or these, what are they called, Supanas. The Supanas are the Garudas, kind of dragon birds, and the Gandharvas are like celestial musicians. Yeah, so maybe having skepticism about those types of beings, I don't find that to be problematic because those teachings are not mentioned very often in the text, and they don't play any kind of critical role in the full map of the Dharma. But if we take the Dharma as a comprehensive whole, an integral, consistent, internally coherent whole, then all of those teachings, like different realms of existence, karma, lives beyond the present one, are essential to make sense of the entire teaching. Then to take another example, here we're going at the ultimate level. So the Buddha's teaching aims that the ultimate goal is nibbana, which is the destruction, the utter elimination, eradication of raga, dosa, moha, the destruction of greed or lust, hatred or anger, and delusion or ignorance. Okay, I have no idea what it's like to reach the utter destruction of greed, hatred, and delusion. But I can see for myself through the practice of the Dharma that to the extent that I practice sincerely and earnestly, diligently, it brings some reduction, slowly and gradually over the years, in greed, lust, anger, hatred, hopefully in delusion. And so I could see that these defilements diminish, the degree of happiness, calmness, equanimity, inner peace increase. And so that's something I could say, this I see for myself, this I know for myself, that we practice sila, samadhi, panya, and we diminish greed, hatred, delusion. And on that basis, I have the confidence and a faith in the Buddha that there is the possibility of reaching a stage where there is a complete destruction of greed, hatred, and delusion. And the confidence or trust that there are those who have reached the complete destruction of greed, hatred, and delusion, namely the Buddhas and the Arahants. Okay, so in effect, yeah, that's the sutta. Then the Buddha just applauds, and it says, repeats, with the breakup of the body after death, the generous person is reborn in a good destination in the heavenly world. Okay, I took longer on this than I intended to, but anybody have any questions or comments about this? Okay, I see Mariam in California.
Yes, good morning, Bhante.
Yeah,
I wanted to, with regard to fate, I'm thinking about the way I'm looking at it. I think of, okay, I do not have the experience for myself yet, but because I believe in the Buddha and what he says, then that becomes a hypothetical theory for me.
that becomes a what?
Hypothetical theory.
Hypothetical theory. Okay, okay, go on.
So instead of fate, using the word fate, which because of the background that I have with the other religion, it makes me feel like I
Okay,
have
yeah.
to blindly believe
Yeah,
it.
okay, yeah. So you want to say, can you say it's a hypothetical theory?
Yes.
Well, the hypothesis would be like an objective statement, but maybe you could use the word trust if the word faith gives some problem. Yeah, I understand that people coming from certain backgrounds will have trouble with the word faith because they're told you have to have faith. If you don't have faith, it's down to hell with you.
Okay. All right. So I'll use
Yeah,
faith. I use trust.
yeah, yeah. You can say you have trust in that. I say a principle of karma and rebirth. Because
Yes,
for like somebody for the Buddha, it's not a theory anymore, but it's
exactly.
something verified.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. And then we have Vero.
Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
I have a question. These fruits are independent of, for example, the person who we donate, or there are some aspects we should reflect on before to donate. I mean, I remember a story, I think from Anatapindika nephew. Several times his nephew went to Anatapindika to
Wait,
Bodhi.
your voice is breaking up over the speaker. Maybe repeat the question.
Okay, only my concrete question is if these fruits are independent of the person who I donate, or maybe are related with the person which I give. For example, the worthy person. I don't know if it is the same fruit. If I donate, for example, food to renunciant
Yeah.
or to a neighbor, what a guidance about who
I
are
s-
these persons?
okay. I think I understand the question now. Yeah, I like to distinguish here between different types of giving, but maybe your question would come. Let's hold up your question because I think some of the later suttas might answer that. Okay? And we'll see if it becomes clear when we come to a later sutta in the same series. If not, then I'll come back to it later. Okay, we'll take Kat.
Hi, hi, Bhante.
Yeah.
So my question is, with the breakup of the body after death, a donor, does that mean donor of the dead body or the donor of?
No. It means somebody who has, during their life, they have practiced giving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Of
you,
course, if
Bhante.
somebody donates organs or or tissues from the body, that of course is a very, very valuable, precious type of giving, which I think would generate very powerful, wholesome karma. But of course, they practice the act of giving while they're alive, since they would sign some document or leave some document behind saying that I donate these organs or these tissues. So they're performing the act of giving while they're alive, even though the actual organs or tissues are not removed till their till their death.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, let us move on to the next sutta, and I think this might answer Veyro's question. Actually, the next one is almost the same as this one, only one little difference, which doesn't seem so clear. One is not deficient in the layperson's duties. So we skip over this one. This one is interesting. So this is a sutta on 5 timely gifts. So these are like special acts of giving, not the ordinary acts of giving, but giving on special occasions, which the Buddha says are especially valuable types of giving. Okay, so one is that one gives a gift to a visitor. And so when you have a visitor, it's sort of, this is a basic principle of hospitality. Of course, it's a principle very deeply embedded in Indian culture from ancient times right up to the present. So I think that there's a saying in Indian culture that the visitor should be regarded as, or the guest should be regarded as second only to the gods. And so when you have a guest, then it's proper to offer them a gift. And it could be something simple, like you have a visitor, then you can prepare some tea, coffee, maybe a plate of cookies or fruits, and you offer that to the person. So it might not be very much, but it's a simple act of being cordial and helpful to others. Okay, then the next one gives a gift to somebody setting out on a journey. And here, what's really probably intended is giving the appropriate kind of gift for somebody setting out on a journey. And remember, in India, in the Buddhist time, when you set out on a journey, you're not going out in a car and where will be like restaurants along the road where the traveler could stop and take in a meal. But when you set out on a journey, the person will have virtually no way to get food. So the appropriate gift for setting out on a journey, to give to somebody setting out on a journey, is to give them a parcel, a package of food to take along the journey. Okay, the third one gives a gift to a patient. So when somebody is sick, and if they have no other way to get no readily available source of food, so you provide a gift to the patient. Well, a gift of food would be especially helpful, but sometimes any little gift can lift up the spirit of the patient. Even a get well card or a gift of flowers or some little knickknack that will make them feel that they're appreciated and that there are others who are concerned about them, that want them to get well. Okay, then we get to a very serious matter, and that is one gives a gift during a famine. And this is, a really serious problem that we're facing today with so many serious food shortages and even famines breaking out around the world. If you follow here in the United States, the PBS public broadcasting station NewsHour, and you can find the recordings of past episodes on YouTube. The last 3 days, the PBS has had long segments on food shortages, and even not quite a famine level, but serious food shortages in the African state of Chad, which is in northwest Africa. And it's really just so heartbreaking, largely because, or at least one of the major contributing factors, is climate change, which is changing land that had previously been fertile to barren land, so people can't grow crops anymore. And then the war in Ukraine is causing shortages of fertilizer and the fuels that are needed to cultivate the crops. And there are many organizations that are working to help people suffering from hunger and food shortages. And amongst them, I might mention the organization that I established years ago. This is not an advertisement for it, but we have the organization called Buddhist Global Relief, which provides food relief to communities around the world afflicted with chronic hunger and malnutrition. So if you want to make a gift to an organization that's helping to address global hunger, then I might mention Buddhist Global Relief. But there are other organizations, the World Food Program, Action Against Hunger, which is a partner of Buddhist Global Relief. So you can give some gift of whatever kind to help relieve people suffering from hunger, food shortages, and famine. And then next comes one first presents the newly harvested crops and fruits to the virtuous ones. And again, this expression virtuous ones is a bit of a code word, meaning the virtuous monastics, the monks and nuns who go on alms round, who subsist on the offerings of the faithful. And so this becomes a common, almost a ritualistic practice in Buddhist countries, particularly in the agrarian areas. So when farmers take in their newly harvested crops, rice, and especially rice, but also other, if they grow fruits, would be what kind of fruits? Bananas, coconuts, and so on. They'll take a portion of that and they'll set it aside, and then they'll prepare it, and they'll make a special offering of those first crops, the first crop of rice, to the monastics. Sometimes they'll actually go to the temple to invite the monks to come to the house, and then they will give the first harvest of rice, at least some of it they'll give to the monks at an alms offering. So those are the 5 timely gifts. And then you can see this elaborated somewhat, that one gives the timely gift to the noble ones who are stable and upright, and one gives with a clear mind. And this would be a mind of confidence and trust. In a way, somebody like a skeptical critic might be standing on the sidelines saying, these verses are somewhat self-serving, since the Buddha is praising what in effect means giving to the members of his own monastic community. So he says one should give a gift where it yields great fruit. And then he points out that merits are the support of living beings when they arise in the other world. I've heard some of my friends, even people who are Buddhists, question this idea of merit. Like, what is the purpose of generating merit? What is meant by merit? Why this concern with merit? Okay, 2 things to say about this. First, if one practices generosity just exclusively for the purpose of getting merit for oneself in order to reap some personal benefits for oneself, that state of mind is a kind of obstacle to one's progress. It's a kind of corruption or defect in one's practice of giving, because one is giving only with a self-seeking mind. So that's the first thing I would say. But the second thing I would say is that when one gives with a truly generous mind, with a mind that here, with a clear mind, a mind of trust, confidence, faith, and devotion to the members of the Sangha, out of respect and reverence for the monastics as being the visible representations of the Buddha and the Dharma, then the text says the offering is vast. And then this verse is interesting, that it's not only those who actually give, make the offering, who generate the vast merit, but also those who rejoice in these deeds. So when even if you're not able to give yourself, but you hear that other people have practiced giving and you rejoice in their generosity, then you too, with that mind of rejoicing, also generate the merit. And that leads into the second thing that I was going to say about this idea of merit, and that is indicated by this second couplet of the verse, that merits are the support of living beings as we pass on from this life to our future life. So when we take rebirth, we want to be reborn in a good realm of existence. If anybody wants to be reborn in the realm of the hungry ghosts, just to see what it's like, then you could be really stingy and mean-minded. Just go ahead. If you want, and you won't get any merit by being stingy and miserly and mean-hearted, but you'll generate the karma that will give you the opportunity to see what life is like in the realm of the hungry ghosts. If you want to see what life is like in the hell realms, you could go around killing and stealing, maligning good people, spreading nasty rumors and so forth. And then you'll get a chance to visit the hell realms. And if you just want to remain content with bare sensual enjoyments at the animal level, and then take the chance to see what life is like in the animal realm, just go ahead and do that. But if you want to take rebirth back into the human realm under certain favorable conditions, or rebirth into the heavenly realms, and to build up what's most important to my mind, to build up the equipment, the accumulations, the resources for progressing on the path to enlightenment and liberation, then we need merits. So merits are our support. And the word used, the translated support, is like literally, it's like a standing place, the place on which we stand. So as we're going to move to our next existence, we need something to stand on so that we don't fall down to lower realms of existence. And then merits provide, I would call this the fuel for the propelling the rocket ship of our mind, not to the moon, not to Mars, not to some other planet, but to propel the rocket ship of the mind to the realization of nirvana, nibbana. So merits are an essential support for that. Of course, merits alone are not sufficient. You also have to balance merits with wisdom. Okay, let's continue, see if we could get through this chapter. Then I'll take some questions. Okay, here, the donor who gives food gives the recipients 5 things. So one gives life, because people or any living being subsists on food. So when you give the food, you're supporting their life, sustaining their life. You give beauty, since if you see a person who's really hungry, who is emaciated, then the features become, the color of the face changes, and the features become sort of withered, grim. But when the person gets sufficient food, then when the body recovers its strength, its health, then the features become lovely and attractive. And of course, when you receive food, you experience pleasure or happiness. Food gives us strength. And then the 5th benefit of receiving food, it's a word that's a bit difficult to translate into English. So here, I think I use discernment. Do you have discernment in your translation? Because this was a temporary translation.
Yes, Bhante.
You have to, so I kept discernment. But the idea here would be maybe mental clarity. Because if you're afflicted with hunger, you can't think very clearly. Your mind doesn't function with full proficiency. But when you have sufficient food, then the mind becomes clear and effective and agile, and you can think clearly. Okay, so when you give food, you give these 5 things, and that karma of giving food has the potential to bring back to oneself. This is the working of karma and its fruit, that karma will contribute towards obtaining these 5 benefits for oneself. So one will have the benefit of a longer lifespan, either in the heavenly realm or as a human being. It will bring the benefit of obtaining beauty, having beautiful, attractive features, of experiencing pleasure or happiness, of having strength or health, good health, and of having discernment, a mind which is sharp, clear, and you would say intelligent, with a kind of active intelligence. Again, accepting these teachings depends on having trust or confidence, but we find these teachings occurring in various places in the Nikayas, and so I myself would place trust in them as being valid. Okay, so those are then just the verses basically repeat the same thing. Okay, so now this is a sutta which speaks about the 5 benefits that come to a clansman. And the sutta uses the word kula, which literally means the son of a family. Actually, the word clansman is not so good here in America because it suggests something else, which is quite different from what's intended. But let us just say a householder, whether man or woman, we'll make it gender neutral. So there are 5 benefits that come to the householder who's endowed with faith. And this is, again, referring specifically to one with faith in the Buddha Dharma. And so it's said that when the good persons in the world show compassion, they first show compassion to the person endowed with faith, not so much to the person without faith. And this, if you just take the translation or even the Pali text on face value without explanation, it seems, I would say, a little bit prejudiced and biased and a bit unfair. So why should a good person show compassion to some but not to others? And one might even say that a good person, a truly compassionate person, should show compassion to those without faith, at least without faith in moral values. And so the footnote here, which I think is based on the commentary, gives some explanation of this. Let me increase the font size so it's clear. So here the explanation says that they show compassion to these householders by offering them an opportunity to give alms and thereby acquire merit. And so it's not so much the case that the lay people who give alms to the monastics are showing them compassion, but it's the monastic who goes to the homes of the lay people to receive their offerings, show compassion to the lay people. And I have to say, in a contemporary American culture, this would be something almost contrary to common sense. But in terms of the traditional Buddhist framework, this is quite, easily acceptable. The meaning would be quite clear and transparent. So you think that it's the person who offers alms to the monastic on their alms round, or who goes to the monastery to offers the food to the monastics, who is showing compassion to the monastics. And in a way that is true, but it's also true in a somewhat deeper sense, that it is the monastic who goes with the alms bowl to the homes of the householders and stands there silently, holding out the alms bowl, and receives their offering of alms, who is showing compassion to the householder. Because that alms bowl of the renunciant is, in a way, maybe put it a little grossly, it is the ticket on the highway to the path leading to Nibbana, that it is the act of generosity by which lay people make offerings to the monastics that generates that powerful, wholesome karma with the capacity to lead to enlightenment and liberation. And so, like somebody like Mahakassapa, who was one of the Buddha's foremost disciples, his practice, let's see, was it Mahakassapa? Yeah, I think it was Mahakassapa who would go to the homes of the poor people to give them the opportunity to practice giving. So even though the poor people don't have much to give, but Mahakassapa was, such a great arahant with supernormal powers. And so when he would go to the homes of the poor people, even if people could give only a spoon of rice or a little dal curry or a couple of bananas, but just by giving to Mahakassapa, they generate such powerful, wholesome karma with the capacity to produce wonderful and amazing fruits in the future. So it would be somebody like Mahakassapa who would be showing compassion to the poor people by going to the poor section of town to receive their offerings. But there was another disciple of the Buddha, I don't remember who it was, who would go especially to the homes of the rich people to receive their offerings. And I think somebody, one of the other monks, criticized him and said, "You're being biased and prejudiced and a bit selfish in your choice of a place to go for alms. You're going to the homes of the rich people because you're thinking, they are wealthy, they'll have abundant, delicious food to offer to me. So you're being somewhat greedy by going there." So the monks went to the Buddha complaining about that person going especially to the rich section of town. And then the Buddha called that monk to his presence in the midst of a sangha to get an explanation. And that monk explained that rich people tend to be miserly. And if I didn't go to them to receive their offerings, that miserliness would strengthen its grip on their heart, and they would not get a chance to generate merit, and they would risk the danger of falling down because of their miserliness. So when I go to them, then I give them this chance standing there. I give them the chance to make some offering, to open up their hearts to the practice of generosity. And so in that way, I'm showing compassion to them. Okay, so here we have the case where good persons show compassion first to the person with faith, not so to the person without faith. But there are also some cases of recorded cases of monastics who make the special point of going to the person without faith. And there's an interesting story to illustrate this. I think this is at the beginning of the Milinda Panha, the questions of King Milinda. So there was this eminent monk named Nagasena, who was an arahant and very accomplished in many ways. And every day he would go on alms round through a particular village. It was a village of Brahmins. And he would come to the house of a Brahmin. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not Nagasena. It's an elder monk. And the monk who's to become Nagasena had been reborn as the son of that Brahmin. So the boy is there, and this Arahant knows that that boy is the future Nagasena, who's going to become a great monk, a great expounder of the Dhamma. And so but the Brahmin family is not a follower of Buddhism. And so the monk goes every day. He comes on his alms round to the house of the Brahmin family. He stands there with his bowl, and the Brahmin doesn't come out to offer alms. And then the monk waits a couple of minutes, then moves on to the next houses. And this goes on for maybe a couple of years. And one day the monk is standing in front of the house of the Brahmin, and the Brahmin comes out and says to the monk, "I'm sorry, we're Brahmins, we don't give to the Buddhist monks. Please pass on, Venerable Sir." And then the elder monk says to the Brahmin, "Thank you very much. I really deeply appreciate it." And then he goes on to the next houses. The next day, the elder monk goes on his alms round. He comes to the house of the Brahmin, and the Brahmin sees him standing there, and he comes out of the house and says, "Sir, I want to ask you a question. Yesterday, when you came for alms, I told you we don't give, and I just asked you to move on. And you said to me, 'Thank you very much, I really appreciate it.' Why did you say that when I didn't offer you anything?" And then the elder monk said, "Well, I've been coming by here every day for a couple of years, and you never even came out of your house to speak to me. Yesterday, you had the courtesy to tell me to move on. And so I thank you for coming out to speak to me." And when he said this, the Brahmin was sort of struck by wonder and amazement. Wow, how courteous these monks are, how appreciative, how thoughtful, how kind, that even though I gave nothing, he just thanked me for my words of refusal. And then the Brahmin said to the monk, "Please come again tomorrow." And, and then the monk came, and the Brahmin started to give to him. And in time, the elder monk got close to the Brahmin. The Brahmin invited him inside, and then the monk got close to the little boy. And then the boy, because he had been a Buddhist monk in past lives, developed his faith in the Buddha Dharma. And in time, that little boy got ordained as a novice and then became the great elder Nagasena. Okay, so anyway, I've dwelt for a long time on the first benefit. So how the good person shows compassion to the person with faith. And then when they first approach the person with faith, they receive alms from the person of faith. And then when they teach the Dhamma, they teach the Dhamma to the person with faith. And then the fifth, with the breakup of the body after death, a person with faith is reborn in a good destination in the heavenly world. So those are the 5 benefits that come to the clansman with faith. And then we have the simile, and then the application of the simile sort of brings out the point of the previous passage. So just as at a crossroads on a level ground, there's a great banyan tree, and that becomes the resort for the birds all around. So when a householder, whether male or female, is endowed with faith, that householder becomes the resort for many people, for the monks and nuns, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, for other male lay followers and female followers, so that householder who has faith and who practices generosity then becomes a support, a resort for many people. And then the verses, just elaborate on that. I think we should leave some time for questions. And maybe I should go back to the question Vero asked, because I don't think these suttas answered it clearly. I think the point of a question was whether there is a difference in the merit generated by the person to whom one practices giving. If that is the sense, there is a sutta which says that the act of giving is purified in the sense that the merit is increased by way of two factors. One is the quality or state of mind of the person who's giving, and the other is the character or state of mind of the recipient. So in terms of bare merit, the merit becomes increased when the giver is one who is, say, well-grounded in sila, that is in the precepts, who has faith in the law of karma, and who has other qualities, particularly like kindness, compassion, softness, and gentleness, and so forth. So those qualities sort of intensify the merit created by the act of giving. And then in terms of a giving motivated by religious faith, that depends also on the qualities of the recipient. When the recipient is one with faith or trust in the triple gem, and this is generally taken in relation to giving to renunciants, one who is a genuine follower of the Buddha Dharma, well-grounded in sila, in the moral practice, ethical practice, with kindness, with generosity, and with some development in the meditative qualities of calm and insight. And at the highest level, those established in the fruits of the spiritual life, up to the state of the arhat, that sort of intensifies the merit in the act of religious giving. And so the word arahat itself literally means worthy one, in the sense that the arhat is the only one who's truly worthy to receive the offerings of the faithful. So we say that those of us monastics who are not yet arhats are, in a sense, when we receive the gifts of lay people, we receive them as a debt. And the only way we can clear that debt is through the attainment of arhatship. Okay, so having said that, later Buddhist texts make a distinction between three, sometimes two, sometimes three fields of merit. I think it's very important to bear this in mind, because otherwise it could lead to a one-sided emphasis on giving to monastics and neglecting other types of giving. So the later texts make a distinction between, let's take the three fields of merit: the field of reverence, the field of gratitude, and the field of compassion. So the field of reverence means giving to monastics, and I would say not only in the Buddha's time, but also maybe today, not only to Buddhist monastics, but giving to anyone who's living a life of renunciation, particularly in a culture where you have renunciants coming on alms round, who depend on the support of the laity for their subsistence. So giving to renunciants, to support them, to sustain them in their life of renunciation aimed at some kind of purification. So that's the field of reverence. The field of gratitude is giving to those towards whom one feels gratitude. And especially mentioned will be one's parents, maybe elder brothers or sisters who have helped you in your childhood, giving to teachers, or any other benefactors. So out of gratitude towards them, you give them gifts, either just, call this sentimental gifts, just to show your gratitude, or giving them in times when they urgently need some help. And then the third field of giving is called the field of compassion. And that would be people who are inflicted with suffering, with poverty, with need, the hungry, the sick, giving help to the sick, providing them with medical care, providing clothes to those who don't have sufficient clothing. So if you have old clothing that is still usable, you could give them. There are collection agencies which collect old clothes and then distribute them to the poor, especially as winter is coming on, and then giving food to the hungry. I mentioned medicines to this, giving medical assistance to the sick. Yeah, and then there are also organizations which provide homes to people without homes, so helping homeless people get homes. Okay, maybe we could just have time for a few little questions. I spoke too much today. I see somebody put a chat in. Somebody said it was Ananda, Venerable Ananda, who went to for alms to collect alms at the homes of the rich people. Yeah, I think that there was somebody else who was an arhat who went to the rich people. That it's not fresh in my memory. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. And okay, Kat had a question already, so let's take Gita.
Bhante, thank you so much for teaching us this Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bhante, I have a question. I've always been confused. So out of compassion, if you can give me a brief answer. In the Mahayana teachings, like in the Diamond Sutta and the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutta, they talk about there's no giver, there's no receiver, there's no gift. So I'm understanding this in a super mundane state where there's no self, there's no anatta, right?
Yeah.
Is my thinking correct? Or Bhante, what are your thoughts on it? Or, briefly.
Yeah, I think maybe we could understand that from 2 points of view. One, a more theoretical point of view, and maybe that's sort of from the point of view of the Diamond Sutra itself, which is the point of view of prajna or prajna paramita.
Paramita, exactly.
Yeah, the perfection of wisdom. So the perfection of wisdom sees that there are no substantial realities, that all dharmas are empty. And so in that sense, you could say that the person who's giving is just a conceptual construct, so empty of any intrinsic self-nature.
Exactly.
And the recipient is, again, a conceptual construct, empty of any self-nature. And the gift itself is a conceptual construct, empty of any self-nature. So at the level of deep insight or prajna or panya, then there's no substantial giver, recipient, or gift. They're all empty of self-nature. And so from that point of view, you could say no giver, no giver, no recipient,
and no gift.
No gift. But it doesn't mean that one doesn't practice giving, but one practices giving, but without a mind of clinging.
Yes, without attachment.
So I think the second aspect maybe is an antidote, maybe what developed in the Buddhist community because of the emphasis on giving is one gives with a sense of I am benefiting them. So I am somebody special, maybe seeking the benefit of praise, good reputation, confidence in the assemblies, and so on. And maybe priding oneself, putting oneself above the recipient. And so when you practice the idea, no giver, no recipient, no
Receiver.
gift, yeah, then
Anatta. Yeah.
sort of undermines that conceit that could arise through the practice of giving.
Excellent, Bhante. I understood it correctly. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll have to end now because I'll have to go for the lunch. And so let us end with the sharing of the merit. And I want to mention just a little promotion. Next week, I will have the class in the morning as usual, but in the afternoon, our organization, Buddhist Global Relief, will be having a special outreach program from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern US time, 3 to 5 p.m. on the theme of creating a more compassionate world. So we'll be having some presentations about Buddhist Global Relief projects and some special speakers, distinguished speakers. One will be Joseph Goldstein, one of the pioneers in the development of insight meditation in the US. One will be Bhante Buddharakkhita from Uganda. I think maybe one of the first fully ordained Buddhist monks from Africa, and certainly the first one from Uganda. Your Canadian, Bhante Saranapala from the Misaga Buddhist Temple, and Venerable Kama Legshi Tsomo, one of the first bhikshunis or fully ordained Buddhist nuns in the Tibetan tradition, and other speakers. And last but perhaps not least, the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, who you might have heard of. So please do make it a point to join us next Saturday, October 29th, 3 to 5 p.m. Okay, so let me end by sharing the merits. And so we'll share the merits with the devas, the nagas, and other beings, asking them to protect the Dharma, to protect the world. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirangra kantu sasanam. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirangra kantu desanam. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva Chirangra Kantu Mankarang. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all beings also be thus. Okay, so thank you all for joining.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu,
Bhante.
Go to
Thank
Bhante.
you, Bhante.
Okay,
Thank you,
okay.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu,
Thank you,
sadhu.
Bhante.
Okay.
Have a good lunch, Bhante. Be
Thank you,
safe and take
Bhante.
care. Be
Okay,
safe.
okay, take care.
Bye, Bhante. Take care.
Okay, take care. Okay, bye-bye.